Good morning, First Unitarian Church. Oh, that's pretty good. I thought I was going to have to harass you a bit. That was very good. I'm watching the baby play over here to my left, and I'm reminded of something Nietzsche actually said. I'm going to throw some Nietzsche into the sermon today, so I've got Nietzsche on the mind. But Nietzsche said, "The task in a demystified world is to discover a second innocence, like a child at play." So everything I say today is a footnote to you, my friend. So welcome to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I'm Dr. Riegel. I am the developmental minister here at First Church, and I want to extend a warm welcome this morning to our visitors, those of you who are here with us in the sanctuary, and those of you who might be watching online for the first time. First Church is a unique place. It is a place where you are free to be you, no matter your race, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your socioeconomic status, your age, or what have you. So we invite you to bring your questioning mind, your expansive heart, your entire self to this beloved community. Our mission at First Church is to welcome all with love, to support learning and spiritual growth, and to serve our wider community working for justice, equity, and inclusion. If you are visiting with us today, we especially welcome you. We'd like to invite you to join us for coffee hour following the service. It takes place in Ellen Hall, which is a little bit to the left of the entrance off of Lytton Street where you came in. Just follow the waft of coffee and you'll find yourself there. We'd love to get to know a bit about you and to tell you a bit about our beloved community. Our flowers this morning are donated by Linda and Dick Miltner in memory of their son Tim, who would have turned 42 years old tomorrow. I also want to remind you again to check the announcements in the order of service. Some of us who come to church on a regular basis don't tend to do that every Sunday, but they do change from time to time, and important information is shared in those announcements. And especially I want to point out that the holiday hoopla is happening this coming Saturday. So hopefully you have time to put that on your calendar, and we'd love to see you there. All right, before we begin our service, let's take a moment to wave to the people who are watching on YouTube, and then rise and greet our neighbors or say hello in the chat if you're on YouTube. And when you hear the singing bowl, please return to your seats. Angela, would you come forward and light our chalice for us this morning? So as I said, I'm roping some Nietzsche into today's service. Have I done my Nietzsche a Spiritual Guide sermon for you all yet? Yes. The ones who were here said yes. Okay. All right, so this is from The Gay Science. Nietzsche wrote, "One would think that by now we would be far removed from the ridiculous immodesty involved in decreeing from one's limited vantage point that perspectives are only permitted from one's limited vantage point. Indeed, we cannot reject the possibility that the world may include infinite interpretations." Patty Kelly for Share the Plate, please.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know, every month we designate usually a nonprofit organization for a special offering that entire month. In December, traditionally, our Share the Plate recipients have been the staff of our church for yearly bonuses. And again, this year, of course, we are doing the same thing. This is a wonderful opportunity for church members and friends to show love and appreciation for all of our employees' hard work. Throughout the year, the staff clearly goes above and beyond to advance our mission, serve the congregation, produce inspiring Sunday worship services, pay the bills, oversee the property, teach our children and members of all ages, and provide uplifting music. Please make a generous Share the Plate donation towards a holiday gift for our staff with a check payable to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati with Share the Plate for December or STP employees in the memo line, just as long as it's designated clearly for this purpose. You may also make your donation online through Breeze at any time. And today, our ushers will pass the offering plate for Share the Plate during the musical reflection. Throughout the month, you can still donate also in person by taking an envelope in the back of the church, designating Share the Plate December on the envelope and putting it in the wooden box. We would very much appreciate your tangible thanks to our employees as they work so hard for us. Thank you.
Our first hymn this morning is number 12, for those of you who have the hymnal in the gray hymnal, "O Life That Maketh All Things New." The words should also appear behind me on the screen above the pulpit. Please turn to it and rise as you are able. I've reached that point where it's a 50-50 proposition with my eyes between here and my tablet, so we'll go with that. One day in 1995, a large, heavy, middle-aged man robbed 2 Pittsburgh banks in broad daylight. He didn't wear a mask or any sort of disguise, and he smiled at the surveillance cameras before walking out of each bank. Later that night, police arrested a surprised MacArthur Wheeler. When they showed him the surveillance tapes, Wheeler stared in disbelief. "But I wore the juice," he mumbled. Apparently, Wheeler thought that rubbing lemon juice on his skin would render him invisible to videotape cameras. After all, lemon juice is used as invisible ink. So as long as he didn't come near a heat source, he should have been completely invisible. Police concluded that Wheeler was not crazy or on drugs, just incredibly mistaken. The saga caught the eye of the psychologist David Dunning at Cornell University, who enlisted his graduate student, Justin Kruger, to see what was going on. They reasoned that while almost everyone holds favorable views of their abilities in various social and intellectual domains, some people mistakenly assess their abilities as being much higher than they actually are. This illusion of confidence is now called the Dunning-Kruger effect and describes the cognitive bias to inflate one's self-assessment. The problem is that when people are incompetent, not only do they reach wrong conclusions and make unfortunate choices, they are also robbed of the ability to realize their mistakes. As Charles Darwin wrote in The Descent of Man, ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. The trick is not to be fooled by illusions of superiority and to learn accurately to evaluate one's competence. After all, as with Plato, actual knowledge begins by knowing that one doesn't know. Ah, the fresh ambiguity of my vision. Yeah, this helps. Once upon a time, some out of the way universe that is dispersed into numberless. The cable. Keep talking and you'll know. How are we doing? Are we good? Does that seem better? You don't like hearing only half my words, I assume so. I'm going to start this again. Don't do that. I'm glad you're all very flexible this morning. I'm kind of in a little bit of a punchy space, so. All right. Cue, take two. Once upon a time, in some out-of-the-way corner of that universe that is dispersed into numberless twinkling solar systems, there was a star upon which clever beasts invented knowledge. That was the most arrogant and mendacious minute of world history. Nevertheless, it was only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star cooled and congealed, and the clever beasts died. One might invent such a fable, and yet would not have adequately illustrated how miserable, how shadowy, how transient, how aimless and arbitrary the human intellect looks within nature. There were eternities during which it. And when it is all over with the human intellect, nothing will have happened. For this intellect has no additional mission that would lead it beyond human life. Rather, it is human, and only its possessor and begetter takes it so solemnly, as though the world's axis turned on it. But if we could communicate with the gnat, we would learn that the gnat flies through the air with the same solemnity, that the gnat feels the flying center of the universe also within itself. Is it maybe where I'm standing? Nietzsche's point is that we all live inside a limited world. And over the years, as I've thought about this, I've come to speak of this in a term I call a psychological bubble. We all live in our own psychological bubbles. We don't share anybody else's psychological bubble. We only know our own. And as Nietzsche mentions, we rather feel that the world turns on the axis of our psychological bubble. And this is the predicament of the King of Pointland. The King of Pointland is an exceptional case in point. So who or what exactly is the King of Pointland? So there's a book called Flatland, written by Edwin Abbott, who was a 19th century schoolmaster and theologian. And in this book, Edwin Abbott describes for us Flatland. And Flatland is a universe of only two dimensions. It has length, it has width, but it lacks height and depth. In other words, it is a two-dimensional plane. So if you were to take a piece of paper and hold it up directly in front of your eyes and look at it, you would see the two-dimensional plane, which is the entirety of the universe of all of the characters in Flatland. And the characters in Flatland are all geometrical shapes. So you have a point, you have a line, you have an isosceles triangle, you have an equilateral triangle, you have a square, you have a polygon, you have a hexagon, and so forth, all the way up to the perfect circle. And if you've studied geometry, or you're very quick with your intuition, we'll figure this out as I speak, every single point added to a geographical figure gives it another side. And the more sides a geographical figure has, the more it is able to approximate a perfect circle. And a perfect circle actually is nothing other than a bunch of points embedded next to each other so close there's no distance between them. So the circle actually has the most points of all the geometric shapes. And in Flatland, Edwin Abbott posits that your place in society depends upon how many points you have. If you have 2 points, you're merely a line. You are very low on the rung. If you have 3 points, you're a triangle of some type, isosceles, equilateral. You're a little higher on the social rung. Squares are next higher, polygons next higher, etc., 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 all the way up to perfect circles, which happen to be the priests, he says in a rather congratulatory mode. And the priests dictate the social structure of Flatland. Now, one of the things that is also true of Flatland is that your level of consciousness depends on how many points you have. So a line is less conscious than a triangle, which is less conscious than a square, etc., 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 all the way up to the perfect circle, the priest, which is to rule. So if your level of consciousness is determined by how many points you have, we have a particular problem with the single geometrical point itself. A single point in space without another point through which you can draw a connecting line. So it is the least thing in Flatland. So during this novel, the protagonist approaches the point, and the point proclaims itself, I am the king, I am the king, I am the king. But he doesn't proclaim it to the protagonist. The king just proclaims this out loud to itself, because as far as the king goes, it's the only thing that exists. Me, 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 I'm the king, because there's no one else to be the king. And this is all the king of Pointland, we'll call it, knows how to do. So this raises a predicament for the king. The king of Pointland, Flatland, is trapped in a self-sealing loop. All the king knows is the king's self. All the king's reference points are the king's self. And the only person to hear the king speak is the king himself. Therefore, everything the king says is brilliant. Me, 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 me. So this leads to certain psychological traits of the king. The king is constantly self-referencing, and also, as you can predict, rather narcissistic. Okay. Do you get the gist of that? All right. So as I've mentioned, the King of Pointland's predicament is actually shared by each of us. And I know what you were thinking before that statement. You were thinking, well, that explains a lot of the people I know out there. But it also explains you to an extent. We are all actually exceedingly self-referential. We live in our own psychological bubbles the vast majority of the time, just like the King of Pointland. And there's a number of problems that arise for us because we live within our own psychological bubbles. The greatest problem that I think results from living in our own psychological bubbles, much like the King of Pointland, being so self-referential, is that we often fail to recognize our effects on other people. And that's the thesis of this sermon. To the extent that we are self-sealing, to the extent that we live within our own psychological bubbles, we fail to recognize the effects of ourselves on other people, the things we do, the things we say. and how that impacts others. You could say it like this: the propensity to self-reference is the failure to other reference. If there is a moral problem that plagues us in today's world, I believe this is it. The failure to recognize the effects of our actions on others. Do you remember the first sermon I did here at First Church, My Boy's Shoes? Same thing. Same message. A bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and it burned a boy beyond recognition, with the exception of his shoes that his father recognized. And he went home and he wrote a haiku, and he said, "This boy is not my boy, but these shoes are my boy's shoes." And what I was saying in that sermon is basically the same thing. Whatever happens anywhere is actually something that befalls us all. Every boy's shoes are our boy's shoes. But if we fail to recognize the effect of our actions in the world on other people, we remain oblivious to such things. So it's very important to be able to recognize our effects on other people. Now, the failure to do this is not malintent. It's simply ignorance. It's an ignorance, though, that can be undone by popping one's psychological bubble so that we may learn to become other-referenced. I actually believe this would cure much of what ails us in today's world. This, of course, begs the question, how does one pop one's psychological bubble? Any ideas? Thoughts?
Tell me when I get on your nerves.
What's that?
Tell me when I get on your nerves.
tell you when you get on my nerves. Education. Service? Getting married. Oh my God, brother. I'm not going to say who said that one because you're off camera. Have a conversation with one's children.
Listen more than speaking.
Listen more than speaking.
Get married a second time.
Get married a second time. You can shine the camera on row 4, seat 1 by the... All right. Well, I think we're nipping around the edges of my solution to this problem. I believe the best way to pop our psychological bubble is by adopting the position of mental humility. Our psychological bubble represents a lifetime of our experiences, our information gathering, and our brains putting together narratives about how the world works. It is no surprise that we are tightly identified with them. There are psychological bubbles. They make sense to us for a reason. If my psychological bubble wasn't the best map of the universe from my perspective, I wouldn't hold my psychological bubble. I'd adopt a different psychological bubble and hold it. We all live in the world thinking that the version of the world we hold, our psychological bubble, is the one that makes the most sense. So it can be really hard to have the mental humility necessary to put that into... Right? Isn't that hard? To take the way you think about the world, all your convictions, all your understandings, and set it over here for just a minute, as though it's just one version of the world among 8 billion. Mental humility, though, requires the ability to do that. And I'm proffering this morning, without the ability to do that, without mental humility, it is not going to be very easy to be other-referenced. Because the other will always come up against your deep convictions about your own version of the world. You can't have empathy that way. So, mental humility, I think, is the way forward. So what does mental humility look like? Well, first, it's important to recognize that we don't know what we don't know. This is an epistemological problem. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. It's the study of how do you know that you know that you know. And I'm suggesting it's equally important how you know that you don't know. Because it's important to remember there's stuff you just don't know. And the stuff you don't know might very well disconfirm the stuff you know. That's why they say ignorance is bliss. So if we have mental humility, we first recognize there's stuff we don't know. And it's important to have the humility to go seek out disconfirming data points to challenge what you think you know. That's half of humility. There's a great story about this. Galileo's telescope. When I read about the story of Galileo's telescope back in college, I thought, oh my gosh, this is an amazing story. It explains so much about how the human psyche operates. So Galileo, of course, as we all know, was a medieval scientist, or a little after the medieval ages. And here's the story, as best I can remember it in a nutshell. So we all know that the Roman Church took over the world, not just in religious terms, but also in political terms. And anybody who came up against the authority of the church was anathema. And the authority of the church, of course, was rooted in the Bible as the revealed Word of God. So, at one point, Aristotelian cosmology was latched onto by the church because the church believed that Aristotelian cosmology was in perfect harmony with the Bible. And so Aristotelian cosmology became the scientific truth of the day. Note that the scientific truth of the day was religiously determined, not vice versa. Echoes of that still going on today, aren't there? And what was it about Aristotle's universe? Well, the earth was the center of Aristotle's universe, just as the earth is the center of God's creation. And in Aristotle's universe, everything was in perfect harmony, and all the stars and the planets were perfect spheroids. And it all rotated according to God's plan, which fit well with the church's understanding of the Bible. But along came certain people who actually had a scientific spirit that ran up against the church. Copernicus, for instance, said, Earth isn't the center of the solar system. The sun is the center of the solar system. And the earth revolves around the sun. The earth. Should I back up a bit? Oh, okay. So the earth revolves around the sun, not the sun around the earth. And Copernicus, of course, met on hard times because of this theory. Then along comes Galileo and Kepler. They lived at the same time, by the way. And they both held to the Copernican view. Galileo constructed his telescope. And he looked out his telescope into the heavens, and he saw things that didn't fit with Aristotle's view of the universe. In other words, he saw things that were going to upset Rome. And he was writing to his colleagues at the universities, begging them to come and look through his telescope so that they could see what he saw. And they were so convinced about the Aristotelian cosmos that they laughed at him and refused to look through his telescope. Writing these letters to Kepler about how infantile and foolish his colleagues were who wouldn't even look through his telescope. Because they didn't feel that there was any point in doing so, they thought they knew. Galileo was basically saying to them, but you don't know what you don't know. And if you look through my telescope, there are things you don't know that might challenge the way you think about the world. For instance, if you look through my telescope, you will see that oh, yeah, there's an idea.
Sorry, I know you want to be able to move, but
I know.
one that I can't fix.
You know, I can be slow. I can be slow on the uptake. Doug's up there probably for the last 15 minutes ago. He could just step behind the pulpit. There's a solution for you. All right, where was I? Oh, yeah. So Galileo was trying to convince his colleagues to look through his telescope. And he said, if you look through my telescope, you will see that there are moons around Jupiter. And you will see there are mountains on our own moon. Well, these things belied Aristotelian cosmology, because in Aristotelian cosmology, there wouldn't be mountains on the moon and craters on the moon. And this is what got Galileo in trouble with the church. So oftentimes it can be very difficult to seek disconfirming data that challenges a viewpoint, especially one's own. And unless one adopts a position of mental humility, one is not going to seek such disconfirming data. And the danger is that the psychological bubble in which you live will not be in lockstep with the truth of what is. And this is part of what makes life difficult. And it's part of what makes life difficult in our interpersonal relationships, and it's part of what makes us not be so open to the perspective of the other. So basically, the state of adopting mental humility means recognizing that our vantage point on the world is just that, our vantage point on the world. That's all it is. Your vantage point on the world, I'm sorry to say, is only that important to you, because there are 8 billion others of them. Recall Nietzsche's gnat. Now, another thing about mental humility is about interpersonal relationships. And sometimes when I speak about interpersonal relationships, I tell people that relationships begin as mutually compatible dysfunctions. So let that sink in for a minute. Relationships begin as mutually compatible dysfunctions. You all know you're scoundrels, right? All right. As the scoundrel you are, who do you tend to form interpersonal relationships with? Scoundrels like you. So by definition, as a scoundrel, and for those of you who might be new to First Church, this is actually a term of endearment that I use from time to talk about the fact that we humans are conditioned creatures, very limited and very skewed in our perceptions, and we're not to blame for who we are. We're just scoundrels. It's the nature of our beast. So if we're scoundrels, every relationship we form with another scoundrel is basically a relationship of mutual compatible dysfunction. I've recently re-upped my activity on Facebook a bit, only to be reminded in short order that the algorithms are throwing people at me that they think I will resonate with. All the scoundrels that they think I will jibe with. And Instagram and TikTok and all the other algorithms that think the way we will keep your attention is by getting you to join with the scoundrels we think you are like. So this is human nature. This is what we do. We seek out those who are similar to us. It is very rare that we expose ourselves to perspectives that challenge our own. In other words, it's very rare that we put time, energy, and effort into connecting with a scoundrel who isn't like us. We don't see the value in that. But I think sometimes the greatest gifts we receive are from those with whom we feel the least resonance. So in closing, to some extent, and probably more than we are wont to admit, we all share the King of Pointland's predicament. We all live within our own psychological bubbles. And the way to counter this tendency is to adopt the state of mental humility. And then intentionally to seek disconfirming data and alternative perspectives from our own. So if you'll bear with me for just another minute, I'm going to reference Nietzsche one more time. And I'll end with this thought. For Nietzsche, we approach actual knowledge when we are able to include as much information and as many perspectives as possible. In his words, the task is to see things as they are. This means to contemplate them through hundreds of eyes across many people. We'll end with that. Our final hymn this morning is number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please turn to it and rise as you are able. Be seated. So, I had a very easy, casual morning this morning. And I got to church, and it was so quiet and peaceful, and I came in here, and I checked in with the AV crew and Jera. And I said to Doug, you know, it's been such an easy morning. And whenever I have an easy morning before church, and I start to think, this is going to be a perfectly smooth, problem-free, wonderful, blessed morning, something always goes wrong. And he said, yeah, like the announcer jinx, you know, like when the announcer says, this field goal kicker has made 246 field goals in a row, and if he makes this one, which he will, it's a chip shot, they will win the Super Bowl, and of course that's the one he misses. So I'm sorry about the cutting out of the sermon is my point. Something had to go wrong given that my morning started so well. I did not write this sermon out verbatim, but I have a lot of bullet points for it, so if you missed too much of it and you'd like to get my notes, just send me an email and I'll send you the notes to this sermon. Angela, would you come up and douse our chalice for us? And we're going to extinguish our chalice to the words of Hafiz, actually. Hafiz said, "It is always a danger to aspirants on the path when they begin to believe and act as if the 10,000 idiots who so long ruled and lived inside have all packed their bags and skipped town or died.